Keanu Reeves and Seagal meet homeless man, singing and discover a life-saving secret. It was just past midnight in downtown Los Angeles. The city buzz had faded into a low, distant hum. Cars became less frequent, lights dimmed, and the sidewalk seemed forgotten by time. But at the edge of an empty plaza, near an old, rusted bus stop, a voice broke through the silence. Not loud, not perfect, but honest, soulful. It belonged to a man most people never noticed. Walter, 62 years old, grey-bearded, hunched from years of sleeping on pavement, wearing the same denim jacket every night, even in the heat. His shoes were torn at the toes, but none of that mattered when he sang. He wasn't begging. He wasn't even trying to entertain. He sang for himself, for something deeper, a song about forgiveness, one that sounded old but eternal. His voice cracked on some notes, yet the pain in his tone made you stop, made you listen, because it wasn't just a song. It was a confession, a cry, prayer. Walter had been on the streets for over a decade. He had no family left, or so he believed. People walked by daily, tossing change into his guitar case, rarely making eye contact. But that night was different. That night, someone did stop. Not just anyone. A man in a black hoodie and jeans. No bodyguards, no flashing cameras, just a quiet face behind a baseball cap. It was Keanu Reeves. He'd just left a charity gala nearby, but something in that voice, it hit different. He stood there, frozen, watching the old man sing. Keanu didn't pull out his phone. He didn't record. He just listened, and after the last note faded into the quiet night air, he stepped forward slowly and asked, "Why do you sing the same song every night?" Walter looked up, his eyes tired but kind. He hesitated, then said 6 words that would change everything. "Because I have to forgive myself." Keanu didn't expect to feel anything that night. After all, he'd just spent hours surrounded by polished people in tailored suits, sipping champagne, and talking about hope and humanity in the comfort of an air-conditioned ballroom. But the truth hit him as he stood there in front of Walter. None of that had moved him the way this old man's voice did. There was no audience here, no red carpet, no performance, just a broken man and a song filled with regret. And yet it felt more real than anything Keanu had heard in years. Walter looked up, squinting as if unsure if this stranger was talking to him or if it was some kind of setup. "You really want to know why I sing it?" he asked cautiously, as if revealing the answer might cost him something. Keanu nodded. No smiles, no pity, just presence. That's what made Walter open up. He told him slowly that the song wasn't just lyrics. It was a message he hoped one day would reach someone in particular, his son. "I used to be a father," Walter began, his voice cracking more from memory than age. "Had a good job, a wife, a little boy who looked up to me like I was Superman. But everything changed after one argument, one moment of anger. He left, just walked out, told himself it was better that way, told himself they'd be fine without him. But deep down, he never stopped regretting it. He didn't know where his son was now, didn't know if he was alive, successful, angry, or broken like him. But every night, Walter sang the same song, because it was all he had left to say. "I'm sorry." Keanu didn't respond right away. He just stood there, breathing it in. That weight, that silence, that kind of honesty doesn't come often, especially not from strangers. "Do you mind if I come back tomorrow?" Keanu finally asked. Walter chuckled, not because it was funny, but because he hadn't heard a sentence like that in years. "I'll be right here," he said. "I always am." And from that moment, what seemed like a random encounter between a Hollywood legend and a homeless man became the beginning of something much bigger. Something that would not only change their lives, but save them. But let me tell you something important. Right now, at the edge of this emotional cliff, is where the real turning point begins. If you think this story has already moved you, hold on, because the most powerful part hasn't even started yet. Before we continue, I want to ask you for something small, but meaningful. If this story has touched your heart even just a little bit, please take a second to comment the word Amen below. That simple word might seem small, but it helps this message reach more people all across the country. This isn't just a story, it's a lesson in love, forgiveness, and the kind of kindness this world desperately needs more of. Did you comment? Thank you so much. And if you feel moved, consider subscribing to this channel and giving this video a like. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us continue sharing stories that matter. May God bless you, return everything you give in double, and shine light on your path every single day. Now, let's continue. The next night, just like he said, Walter was there. Same spot, same song. But this time, there was a difference. A quiet presence sitting on the edge of the stone bench across from him. Keanu had come back. No cameras, no bodyguards. Just him wearing the same black hoodie, sipping a small cup of coffee as Walter's voice floated through the night air once again. After the final note, Keanu stood and walked over. But this time, he didn't ask a question. He just sat next to him and waited. And that's when Walter began to speak, not just about music, not just about the street, but about what broke him. Years ago, Walter had been a high school music teacher. He had a small house, a wife named Linda, and a young son named Jordan. We didn't have much, he said, but we had love and music, always music. But after years of struggling financially, Walter sank into depression. He started drinking, became distant, angry. One night, after a bitter argument about unpaid bills and his inability to hold steady work, he said things no father should say, hurtful final words. Then he slammed the door and never went back. I thought I was doing them a favor by leaving, Walter admitted. I told myself I was the problem, and if I disappeared, maybe they'd be better off. He spent the first few years couch surfing, thinking he'd figure it out and come back. But time moved faster than his healing. Regret became shame. Shame became silence. And by the time I realized I'd made the biggest mistake of my life, I convinced myself they'd moved on, that they didn't want me. Keanu sat in stunned silence. It wasn't just the story. It was the pain in every syllable. The way Walter spoke wasn't dramatic or self-pitying. It was matter of fact, like a man who had accepted his punishment long ago and just kept serving it one day at a time. But I never stopped thinking about my boy, Walter said. Never stopped singing that song. I wrote it for him. Every line is something I should have said face to face, but never got the chance. Keanu looked down, then said something that would flip the entire story. Maybe it's not too late. Walter chuckled again, the way people do when they want to cry but won't. Too late, he whispered. I've been gone longer than I was ever present. Keanu didn't smile. He didn't argue. He just said, what if we find him? Walter turned to him, eyes wide. Find who? Your son, Keanu said. Let's try. Just try. And in that exact moment, the story took a new direction, not just one of sorrow, but of hope. Keanu didn't wait. As soon as he left the plaza that night, he got into his car, sat in silence for a moment, and then picked up his phone. There was only one person he could think of who would understand the depth of what he'd just witnessed, and who would have the power, connections, and heart to do something meaningful with it. Steven Seagal. Despite their wildly different public personas, one, the quiet and thoughtful star of soulful action dramas, the other a larger-than-life martial arts icon. The two had bonded over a shared love for redemption stories, real ones, the kind that don't end when the credits roll. Steven answered on the second ring. Keanu, he said, his voice deep and a little raspy. You good, man? I just met someone, Keanu replied. A man who's lost everything, and I think we have a chance to give it back. Keanu explained everything, the music, the confession, the decades of guilt, and the look in Walter's eyes that screamed, please, help me fix what I destroyed. On the other end of the line, Steven didn't interrupt. He just listened. And when Keanu finished, there was a pause, short but heavy. Then Steven said, let's find his son. That one sentence kicked off a whirlwind of calls, emails, and favors. Steven had a quiet team, people who'd helped him reconnect war veterans with their families and even trace runaway teens back to their homes. It wasn't just about using technology. It was about knowing where to look and how to ask. Within 48 hours, they had a name. Jordan Elias Patterson, 34 years old, living 2 states over in Arizona. Married, no children, worked as a warehouse logistics manager. Clean record. Never spoke of his father. Keanu and Stephen reviewed the file together at a small private studio space they often used for charity events. There was one photo of Jordan. Strong jaw, tired eyes, just like his father. Stephen looked at Keanu and said, "We can't just call this guy up and say, 'Hey, your long-lost dad is homeless and sings in a plaza.' We have to do this right. We have to give it a soul." Keanu nodded. "And a stage." That's when the idea hit them. What if they gave Walter the one thing he'd always dreamed of? One more real performance, one that mattered, one where his son would be in the crowd without even knowing he was coming to see his father. A stage, a song, a chance. All they had to do was set the scene. And that's how the impossible started to become reality. They had a name, they had a city, they had a story aching to be healed. But this couldn't be some quick, emotional ambush. It had to be something crafted with care, dignity, and purpose. Keanu and Stephen sat together for hours, drafting what would become one of the most delicate plans either had ever put into motion. Not for a film, not for publicity, but for one man's shot at redemption. And more than that, for a son to see his father not as the broken man who walked away, but as the soul who never stopped singing his way back home. Keanu reached out to a small, independent community center in Phoenix, known for hosting local talent and emotional healing nights. It wasn't some flashy venue. It was a safe space, a room that held truth in every corner. Keanu offered to sponsor a special evening called Voices of the Forgotten, a night dedicated to real stories, real voices, and second chances. He didn't use his name to sell it. It wasn't about that. It was about getting the right people in that room. One of them, most importantly, being Jordan. Stephen took charge of this part. He contacted a mutual connection who worked at Jordan's company. Carefully, without revealing too much, they arranged to have Jordan win a pair of VIP tickets to this special charity night for community resilience. It was pitched as a networking event mixed with art therapy and live performances. Jordan, thinking it was a way to get out of the house and do something positive, accepted. He had no idea what was coming. Meanwhile, Walter still had no clue what was being built behind the scenes. To him, Keanu was just a kind man who listened. But the day after that second night, Stephen appeared, in person. And when Walter saw them both together, something inside him shifted. These weren't just celebrities passing through for a photo. These were men who stayed, men who didn't flinch when he opened his heart. "We believe in your voice," Stephen said. "But it's the time the world hears it too." They brought Walter into a small rehearsal space, gave him a hot shower, a haircut, a clean set of clothes, but not to erase who he was, only to help him be seen. They asked him to sing his song, the one he wrote for his son, and this time it was recorded. One take, no edits, just raw truth. Stephen placed a hand on his shoulder after the final note and said, "That's not just music, that's medicine." The plan was in motion. The date was set, and as Walter rehearsed, in quiet corners, not knowing that every chord was leading him closer to the moment he'd waited decades for, Keanu and Stephen prepared for a night that would be bigger than any blockbuster. They weren't producing a show, they were producing a miracle. The night arrived cloaked in quiet anticipation. The community center in Phoenix was small, intimate, holding no more than 150 chairs, but that was exactly what Keanu and Stephen had wanted. No spotlights, no screaming fans, just warmth, closeness, and an atmosphere thick with unspoken emotion. The stage was modest, wooden flooring, a soft curtain in the back, a single microphone stand in the center. But to Walter, who hadn't stood on a stage in decades, it might as well have been Madison Square Garden. Backstage, Walter's hands trembled, not because he was nervous about singing, but because this night carried more than just a melody. It carried the weight of a lifetime. Keanu stood next to him, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder. "Just sing like you always have," he said. "But this time don't sing to the street. Sing to the one person you've been trying to reach all these years." Walter nodded, his throat tightening. "I don't even know what I'll say if I see him," he whispered. "You don't have to say anything," Stephen replied from the corner. "Let the music speak." In the audience, Jordan sat unaware. He had come with a co-worker, mildly curious about the event, expecting maybe a few stories, some nice songs, maybe even a free drink. He had no idea that the man he thought he'd lost forever was about to take the stage. He shifted in his seat, sipping water, flipping through the small program. No names stood out, just titles, and one in particular, "Letter to My Son," a performance by W. Patterson. The host took the stage and gave a short, heartfelt speech about the power of forgiveness and rediscovery. Then he called up Walter. The lights dimmed. A soft blue hue washed over the room. Walter stepped out slowly. No fanfare, no introduction, just him, a guitar, and a silence that wrapped around everyone like a held breath. He began to sing, and the room changed. His voice, weathered yet rich, carried a lifetime of sorrow and love in every word. The lyrics weren't just poetic, they were direct. They spoke of mistakes made, of pride broken, of a man who walked away not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much and felt unworthy. It wasn't rehearsed perfection. It was real, raw, alive. And as the final verse came, his voice cracked, not from lack of control, but from the truth finally breaking through the years of silence. "If you're out there, son, this is me, still singing for you. I never stopped. I never will." In the crowd, Jordan froze. His hands stopped clapping. His breath stopped moving. He stared at the man on stage, the eyes, the voice, the name. He turned to his co-worker and whispered, "Did he say Patterson?" Everything slowed down. The final chord hung in the air like a blessing, trembling just above the silence before dissolving into stillness. No one moved. Not a whisper, not a cough, not even a rustle of fabric in the chairs. The room had become a sacred space where time bent itself around the fragile beauty of what had just happened. Walter stood frozen on stage, guitar still in his hands, his eyes locked on the only pair in the room that mattered, Jordan's. And Jordan wasn't blinking. His lips were parted as if trying to form words that his heart hadn't caught up to yet. He stood slowly like someone waking from a deep, surreal dream. His co-worker touched his arm, but he didn't notice. His gaze never left the man on stage, the voice, the presence, the truth. For over 20 years, he had tried to forget that voice, tried to fill the hole his father left with silence, logic, or anger. But no therapy, no prayer, no time had ever closed that wound. Until now. Walter stepped forward, barely breathing. "Jordan," he said into the microphone. His voice cracked, not from nerves but from the quake of pure human longing that finally had a name to speak. "Jordan, is that you?" Jordan nodded once, slow. His hand covered his mouth, eyes glistening, and then he moved. He didn't run. He walked, deliberately. Each step toward the stage was a chapter of his life closing. Childhood confusion, teenage rage, adult bitterness, all of it burned away in the light of this impossible moment. When Jordan reached the stage, Walter placed the guitar. Though down carefully, he didn't reach out. He waited, as if unsure whether he had the right to hug his own son. But Jordan made the decision for them. He stepped into his father's arms. The hug wasn't perfect. It was messy. Jordan's body shook. Walter wept openly, clutching the back of his son's head like a man who'd been drowning and finally reached shore. People in the audience wiped away tears silently. Some clapped, but most just stood in reverent awe. This wasn't entertainment. This was redemption incarnate. Backstage, Steven Seagal and Keanu Reeves watched from the shadows, arms crossed, both silent. Steven leaned over and said, "You were right." Keanu replied, "No, he was right. He never stopped singing." One of the staff brought a second mic and gently placed it on stage beside them. Walter looked at Jordan, still holding him, and whispered, "Will you stay for one more?" Jordan, wiping his face, nodded. Walter picked up the guitar, and together they sang, father and son. Two voices, one soul. As the final harmony faded and the applause gave way to a quiet hum of emotion in the room, Keanu stepped forward. Not onto the stage, not into the spotlight, just enough to be seen, to speak from the heart without stealing the moment. He waited for Walter and Jordan to sit side by side on two modest stools placed on the edge of the stage. The bond was raw, new, and still fragile, but it was real. The kind of real that no headline, no film scene, no viral video could capture. Just human to human, wound to healing, father to son. Keanu spoke calmly, his voice carrying the quiet weight of someone who knew that words must follow truth, not lead it. "What we all witnessed here tonight," he said, "wasn't a performance. It was a homecoming. Walter didn't just sing a song, he sang a lifetime. And Jordan, you listened with the heart of a man willing to forgive." The crowd nodded, still wrapped in the sacred quiet. Walter wiped his face again. Jordan placed a hand gently on his father's back, and Keanu continued, "I made a promise to Walter the first time we met that if I ever had the chance to help him be heard, not just as a man in the street, but as an artist, I'd do everything in my power to make it happen." Keanu paused, then looked directly at Walter. "And I'm keeping that promise." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small folder. Inside, a signed agreement with a non-profit music label co-founded by Keanu and Steven, dedicated to giving a voice to homeless and at-risk artists. Walter's name was on the first page. The label would record, distribute, and promote an acoustic album featuring Walter's original songs, starting with "Letter to My Son." All royalties would go directly to Walter and Jordan as joint beneficiaries, but that wasn't all. "We're also setting up a fund," Keanu said, "one that helps reunite families torn apart by homelessness, because Walter and Jordan's story shouldn't be a miracle, it should be a model." Steven stepped up, beside Keanu now, holding something even simpler, a house key. "And it starts here," he said, "a small home in Phoenix. It's not big, but it's yours, Walter. Yours and Jordan's if you want it. No more sleeping on benches, no more rainy nights with a wet guitar case. Just a roof, a bed, and peace." Walter didn't say anything. He couldn't. He just stood up and hugged them both. Keanu first, then Steven. The kind of hug a man gives when he's been walking through a desert and someone finally hands him water. Jordan joined in, and for a moment the four stood together, two Hollywood legends and two men who'd been lost to the world, but never to each other. As the news of Walter's performance and emotional reunion spread, it didn't take long for the story to explode online. Keanu and Steven, who kept their involvement initially low-key, soon found themselves at the center of a viral sensation. Clips from the Voices of the Forgotten Night circulated on social media, showing Walter's raw, powerful voice and the tearful moment when father and son reunited on stage. Millions of views flooded in overnight, with hashtags like "Sing for Walter" and "Redemption Song" trending worldwide. What made this story stand out wasn't just the celebrity connection, but the undeniable humanity at its core. People saw in Walter's voice a reflection of countless others who'd lost their way, but never their hope. Comments poured in, messages of support, prayers, and stories from people who, like Walter, had experienced estrangement or homelessness. Celebrities, musicians, and activists joined the conversation, sharing the video and pledging help to similar causes. More than that, the public's response created momentum for tangible change. Donations to the non-profit music label skyrocketed. Volunteers offered time and skills to help Walter and others like him. Local community centers reported more people seeking help and connection through music and storytelling. Jordan, too, spoke openly about the healing power of forgiveness, appearing in interviews and urging others not to give up on broken family ties. Walter's story became a beacon, a living example that no matter how dark the past, there is always a path back to light. And while the fame was sudden and overwhelming, Walter stayed grounded. With the help of Keanu, Steven, and the new community rallying around him, he focused on what mattered most: his music, his son, and building the life he'd dreamed of for decades. After the whirlwind of the performance and the viral attention, Walter's life began to change in ways he never imagined. The small home Steven had given him and Jordan became a sanctuary, not just a roof over their heads, but a place filled with music, laughter, and healing. Walter's days were no longer spent wandering the streets with a guitar case. Instead, they were filled with songwriting sessions, interviews, and quiet moments with his son. But Walter made it clear, this new chapter wasn't about chasing fame or fortune. It was about rebuilding trust, piece by piece. He attended community support groups, worked with counselors, and used his music as a bridge to connect with others facing similar struggles. Each song he wrote told a story, not just of pain, but of hope, resilience, and the power of second chances. Jordan, inspired by his father's courage, began to reconnect with the family members he had once distanced himself from. Father and son worked together to heal old wounds, learning that love sometimes needed to be sung into existence before it could be fully felt. Keanu and Steven stayed involved behind the scenes, quietly supporting Walter's journey, helping to arrange small gigs and recording sessions that kept the focus on authenticity rather than spectacle. They made sure Walter's voice remained his own, unfiltered and true. Walter's story became more than just a headline. It became a movement, a reminder that every person, no matter their past, deserves a chance to be heard and loved. That sometimes the greatest heroes don't wear capes or carry cameras, but simply show up, listen, and believe. And as Walter played his guitar under the warm Arizona sun, surrounded by the people who finally saw him, not just the homeless man who sang on the street, but the artist, the father, the man who never gave up, he knew this was only the beginning, because some songs never end. They just start a new verse.